My name's Tracey Chambers, one of the co-founders of the Clothing Bank. Clothing Bank was started in 2010 with the express purpose to help unemployed mothers become financially and socially independent. And we do that by having partnerships with most of South Africa's retailers. And they donate all of the excess product to the Clothing Bank. And we then use that product to change lives. We recruit unemployed mothers into a very comprehensive 2-year program. And we develop them using various tools and training modules to become self-employed business owners. They then buy and sell the clothing from us, and in the last 12 months, those women nationally across our 5 branches made over 30 million rands worth of profits for themselves. And then our ultimate objective is to help them use that money to eradicate poverty in their lives. We have a slogan that says, don't give a woman a fish, teach her how to fish, and teach her how to sell her fish. So if you can sell and learn to sell with confidence, you can have a business for the rest of your life. And we're very proud of the work we do. So that was my first venture, of which I'm still CEO. And really out of that venture, working with women on the ground on a daily basis, looking at where they spend, once they made money, what did they want to spend their money on? And there were 2 things they wanted to spend their money on. One was their home. Housing in South Africa is a major problem. So that was the first thing they spent their money on. And then the second thing they spent their money on was education. And unfortunately, with South Africa's history, geographically, we're still quite segregated because people settled in certain places and the good schools are in the traditional white suburbs. And so she was putting a 3-year-old in a very unsafe minibus at 6 o'clock in the morning on her own in an overcrowded vehicle, spending, I'm going to call it $70 to move her child to a slightly better school in a different neighborhood because she couldn't find quality early childhood in her neighborhood. So that really for us, we're all about business, we're all about self-employment, sparked a model. If we could bring outstanding education into her community, we could use the $70 and turn that into fees, and then that could also be a sustainable business for a woman. So we created a social franchise model in early childhood, which is really what the next video is about.
The Grow with Educare Centres project started in 2014 as a collaboration between the Clothing Bank and the Grow Learning Company. The vision of the project is to develop a national brand of quality, inspirational, fee-paying early childhood development centres to enhance the abilities and skills of the whole child. A second aim is to empower qualified, passionate women to fulfill their ambition to nurture and educate young children and to create a real earning opportunity. Potential candidate facilities are identified. At these creches, conditions are far from ideal. There is a lack of space, almost no play area, limited facilities and educational materials. Most of the teachers or carers are not trained and often have no supplies with which to stimulate the children. The first part of the process is to upgrade the existing facility, which is undertaken by our building contractor. While the facility upgrade is in progress, the franchisee and all her staff attend an 8-module training program. The modules cover all aspects of early childhood development with a large practical component. The teachers have an opportunity to work with the educational equipment that they will be receiving while being given a theoretical background on the purpose of each game or toy supplied. The team assists the franchisee to transform her school by installing all the posters, equipment, and educational toys and games. Every month, the franchisees gather together with the team to receive ongoing skills development and are mentored in being a principal and running a school. The franchisees also have one-on-one meetings with their financial mentor, who assists them with managing their financial obligations and working towards registration of their school. This allows them to request a government grant, which subsidizes their school fees and as such makes the centre financially sustainable. By providing children with a solid foundation for future learning, we believe that we impact the whole child, both scholastically and socially.
So Tracey, I think one of the things that's interesting about a lot of social entrepreneurs is their origin story. So perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about where this all started and your personal journey to creating the clothing bank.
Yeah, so I'm an accountant by profession. Grew up in a very traditional family. My father was an accountant, and I wasn't going to be an accountant. And I don't know, long story how I got there. Something in a queue in a university registration queue, and I realized doing law I had to do languages, and I wasn't particularly good at languages, so that was my career decision. Really spent 20 years in the corporate world, climbing the corporate ladder, the last 9 of them with one of South Africa's major retailers, which is called Woolworths in South Africa, but the equivalent of Marks and Spencer's, different to Woolworths around the world. And every year I was being promoted, and every year I kind of got a bigger paycheck, and the corner office, and the dedicated parking bay, very important things, and the secretary. And along the way I had 2 kids, and I was highly stimulated. Retail's fun. Retail's a lot of fun. It changes every day. But something inside me knew I was on the wrong path. I just knew it. But I was afraid to admit it. Because, the trappings of success are hard to give up. And, I had a whole lot of cheerleaders. I had my parents cheerleading me on. I had my husband, my family, and there were all these cheerleaders. I'm like, how can I be so privileged and yet so unhappy? And so I had my classic midlife crisis. Everyone's going to have one, apparently. It's in the stars. And you have 2 choices, apparently. Choice 1 is you cling like hell to your youth, and you try and stay young, and you're probably going to buy a Ferrari and get a toy boy or a mistress. And it's kind of, from then on, it's almost a struggle, because you really are fighting for, to sort of to stay where you are, in a sense. And I was advised to go and see a medical doctor to manage my stress and my weight, which I haven't conquered that one yet. But and he had given up practicing medicine, and he introduced me to the practice of mindfulness, because he was tired of issuing pills for stress, and he said, that's not a solution. Let's work on management. And so I practiced mindfulness with him for 2 years. And one day, I found my path. It kind of opened up by creating space in my life. And I went home and I said to my husband, I was earning well more than half our income. We had children of 10 and 8. There was a moment where my daughter said to me, what, I don't think I'll bother talking to you anymore, because you're never home and you don't really care. That was a moment. And I'll talk to the au pair, who is my real mommy, and the nanny, who's my other real mommy. And I went home and I said to my husband, I need to get off this fast-moving train. And he said to me, well, then get off. And we're 2 accountants. We had no business plan. We didn't do any calculations. He said, jump. And so I went to my boss the next day, who I loved a lot, and he was very good. He was a great, great boss, and told him that I was jumping off the fast-moving train. And he said to me, no, you can't go. I'm going to give you 6 months. I think you're just exhausted. I'm going to give you 6 months. I'm going to give you sabbatical. And I said, I'm not coming back. And he said, well, I'm giving you 6 months, and I'll take my chances. And I said, oh, I can have that in writing. And I gave myself a year. I said, I will not do any paid work for a year. And because I knew that my natural instinct would be to jump back on a fast-moving train, and what would I do if I didn't do this all day? So I gave myself a year, and the golden rule was not to do any paid work. And I started volunteering at a university which seeks to help children from homes who would, the first child in the family to go to university. And I was mentoring 5 students, and I started lecturing, and I was walking out of there on cloud 9 every single day, not earning a cent. And I really found my passion in that time.
And then, essentially what I say is I came alive. I started to inhabit my body again. I started to feel. I started to laugh again. I started to cry. And my co-founder, Tracey Gilmore, had been bugging me for years. She'd been bugging me for about 5 years. We're friends through a mutual friend, so we bump into each other at dinner parties and everything. And every time we were at a dinner party, she'd say to me, I need you to help me with an idea. And I'd swat her away like a fly. You know, I was far too busy and far too important to think about anything. And she found me in that moment where I had time, I had space, and I had no more excuses. And she invited me for a cup of coffee. And literally on the way, on the radio, somebody was talking about a food bank. I was lecturing, and it was a whole lot of different things, and literally had that cup of coffee. Her idea quickly got swept off the table, but it kind of informed the idea in a funny way. And I cannot tell you how this idea came. We do call it a bit of divine intervention, but I think, luck is when planning meets opportunity. And we were just both ready for it. We had our collective experiences. We knew what we wanted to do going forward on our second phase of life. And 1 hour of coffee, and we literally started running, and she ran. We knew we needed two things. We knew we needed product, and I knew how to get that, and we needed a building to start. And so I ran in the product direction. She ran to ask the local municipality if they had a vacant building. And the scary thing is they both said yes. And then we were in trouble. Then we had to actually do something. And I think that's really the lesson, is that when you take action, things do happen. And you don't have to sit and write, I know you're in business school. But I think, I would have also thought I needed to write a business plan. But really, it's about drive and passion. When you fall in love with an idea, nothing will hold you back. Absolutely nothing. And it's really been that for the last 9 years. It's just been knocking on door after door, and they just keep opening. It's just amazing. And you just have to keep walking through them, and that's really been the journey of the clothing bank.
I think one of the things when Don Weiss first told me about you that he was super impressed by was how incredibly robust your business model is. We talk a lot about business models, and we're thinking about different social ventures and what might work and what might not work. What are some of the factors that you think make it such a strong, reinforcing model?
Yeah. So one of the reasons Tracey's idea got pushed to the side while we were having that cup of coffee is I knew at the time that I did not want to build a business model where I had to fundraise every day. I was on the investment committee in my company, and I could see those people begging for money, and I didn't want to be one of them. And so right from the beginning, we had sustainability and financial sustainability. Secondly, because I came from business, I knew how to build a business with great systems and controls, simple systems and controls, but we set that up right from day one. And those systems and controls have stood us in good stead. And then thirdly, great networks. So, I stuck in a field that I knew that I had networks in, and I knew whose door to knock on. And I just needed one person to say yes, and that was the former retailer that I worked for. And it's been incredible how we now have all the South African major retailers as strategic partners. And I've never in my life seen retail collaborate. It's a highly competitive industry. Just to get two CEOs in the same room is, unheard of. And we could get, all of them in the same room, because somehow I think the why we wanted to do this appealed to so many people. And that is really, in South Africa, 68% of all mothers are single, and 49% of black women live below the poverty line, the lower bound poverty line. And we know in our country, Madiba's Rainbow Nation is teetering on the brink. And it's teetering on the brink because of inequality. And we can't build higher walls anymore. We have to have an inclusive economy. and it has to start with women. We've actually moved into men now, which is another story, and are working with men, and we're very excited about that. And I think that was, people in the boardroom, for the first time, had understood that if we don't have a country, we don't have a company. And perhaps it was right time, right place. I think the other thing is what we do with the clothing is so different to what anybody else did with the clothing. So, the most traditional models, which was part of Tracey's original idea, is let's open charity shops. And coming from my retail background, I knew how expensive retail was, and I knew we were going to empower a couple of people working in retail shops, and the landlord was going to get all the money. And so a little bit of the background to the story around my nanny, whose name is Beauty, who raised my children, and is still very much part of our lives 25 years later. I used to clean up my clothes twice a year, and I don't wear very fancy clothes. I wear mostly clothes from the retailer I used to work for. And twice a year I used to say, Beauty, would you like to take these clothes? And she'd say, yeah, Christmas, and off she'd go. And Monday morning I'd get really excited because she was naturally entrepreneurial, and I'd say to her, Beauty, how much did we make this weekend? And I was absolutely astounded at the exorbitant amount of money she was making out of my secondhand clothes. So I knew there was a market for the product that I could source. In fact, I knew that there was a lot of product, and I knew there was a big informal sector that product would get used in. But I think it's what we do with the women. So one of the learnings, and the biggest learnings for any social entrepreneur that wants to work with people, or wants to have the impact through people, with people, coming from a business background, I thought it was going to be so simple. I thought all I needed to get was supply. Check. I had demand. I had my one-person customer focus group, and I knew she was a single mother. I knew the community in which she lived had a vibrant informal sector. I knew there were low barriers to entry, and I thought, well, how simple is this? Supply. 68% of women, 49% living below the poverty line. If I was a mother, I would do anything to feed my child. Some light business skills, 100% successful. There was my theory of change. Wrong. And it was about 2 years into doing what we set out to do that my partner and I, we nearly lost it. We actually nearly lost it. We were so frustrated and almost angry that the opportunity, that was an incredible opportunity, because the product that we get is our unbelievable product. Some women just couldn't reach for it. They just couldn't reach for it. And it was kind of in that moment where we really, really started to ask, well, what do they need? What do they need? And what they really needed was deep, deep personal development skills. They needed healing. They needed a place where we could, what we finally discovered, and that's very much part of our model, they had, an average age of a woman who comes to our program is 35 with 2.3 children. She'd had a life of hardship, a life of intergenerational poverty, where, the psyche says you can't because. In South Africa, you can't because you're black. You can't because of apartheid. You can't because you're poor. And it's a psyche that is in the back of your head, and a little devil sitting on your shoulder. And so even if an opportunity presents itself, you kind of look at it and you go, nah, I can't because it's not for me. I don't have the skills. I don't have the money. You can make up a million reasons why you can't reach it. And we realized we needed to build an ecosystem in our organization which created small I can moments. From the day she walked through the door, she needed to have an I can moment in a very practical way. And that then stimulates serotonin, and it feels good. And we needed to, and it couldn't be an I can because she did it for me. Because that would be, I can only do it if she's here, and so we really created an ecosystem of I Can moments, and we built a 2-year program as a result. It started as a 2-week program and became a 2-year program, because that's what it takes to reprogram the psyche and move someone out of dependency into independence, and really get cut through the very complexity of the poverty mindset. And
so what's an I Can moment?
Your first sale is an I Can moment. So selling's not for me. So very much in the psyche of South Africans, because of the design of the apartheid regime, South Africans are not schooled to be entrepreneurial. It was typically blue collar workers. You're going to grow up and you're going to be a blue collar worker. That's it. And that's how the government designed it. And so it's not there intergenerationally, and there are not enough role models. So self-employment, which is what we call it, we don't call it entrepreneurship, is not something many people have thought about. And then if they do think about it, they think it's not for me. It's for the Indian culture. So it was very cultural, that it wasn't for me. I just need a job. I don't care what job it is, I just need a job. That's my solution. So we had to work on the reprogramming that anybody can be self-employed, and you don't have to have finished school. Trading is the simplest form of business. And so that first sale that she does, we have to make sure that when she buys that merchandise, she is going to translate that first. We give her about $60 to get started, which will buy her about 20 units. That $60 becomes $250 overnight in cash. And that's her first I Can moment, where she's going, wow, I did that. Not somebody else did that for me. They didn't give me a handout. I did that. And just slowly, we rewrote all of our training programs. And the goal is that everybody leaves the classroom feeling like a genius every single day. Not that I'm really clever and I can teach you something, because that's another I can't. Wow, she was really clever today and I'm not. They've got to feel like a genius every single day. And if they're bored in the class because we've set it at a lower level, then she becomes the teacher and she feels like a genius. So you have to really craft it. We were subtly for the first 2 years reinforcing dependency. And we met a woman called Vivian Schultz, and I'd really encourage you to look her up. And she wrote a book, From Dependency to Dignity. And she's an occupational therapist, and she really understands what she calls taskman fit, and meeting people where they're at, not where you're at. Because if you meet people where you're at, which is what so often happens in development programs, you're setting people up for failure. And she talks about the culture of handouts, and that you really only need 3 handouts to entrench dependency. And the first handout, for the person that's getting the handout, feels like shame. You can't. I can. Let me help. The second handout starts like this. I can't. You must give. The third handout starts like this. I can't. You must give. And if you don't give, I will take. And that's not the dependent person's fault. That's our fault as the giver. So we changed how we transact with the women. Everything was about teaching real business principles, so that at any moment during our program, she didn't feel like it was a handout, because she was so used to being in the dependency mindset that she quickly went back there. And she quickly went into victim. So at no point is she a victim. She's a businesswoman. She's an adult. She can do anything and everything she wants to do, and therefore she does it. So it actually became the psyche that we needed to work on more than the business. And once we fixed the psyche, the businesses, you can't hold them back.
Yeah. Fascinating. Do you see parallels with the microfinance industry and how these small microloans are not handouts? They're meant to be repaid by business activity.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think there's not enough. I think there's we take too much for granted that that'll happen naturally. every woman in our program is allocated a life coach. And this isn't just somebody who thinks they're a life coach. I'm a life coach. It's somebody who's trained as a life coach, who's registered with an accredited institution. And she or he works at a group levels, like group coaching, on the patterns of behavior that have created the dependency to start with. And then we work with, Jimena here used to work for an organization called Poverty Stoplight in Paraguay. And we work with that tool, which measures, it really is a self-diagnosis tool for families in poverty. And it measures 50 indicators of poverty, not how much money you have. I think, for me, there was a moment, it was nearly our first graduation, 2 years, and I walked past our most successful businesswoman in the passage, dressed to the nines. I mean, my goodness, she looked absolutely fabulous. And her name was Nobum. And I said to Nobum, "Oh, it's your graduation today, so exciting, whatever." And I said, "How much money have you got in the bank? I'm so excited to know." Because I actually had a printout. I said, "You have made 240,000 Rand over the last 2 years," which is more money than she would have had in 10 years. "How much money have you got in the bank?" And that was 2 years into our program, and I knew I'd failed. I knew I'd failed because I hadn't helped Nobum break the poverty mindset. She'd lived for today, every day. She was wearing what she'd made and probably had eaten Kentucky and McDonald's every day and lived the high life for 2 years. But her long-term range had not been extended, which is a function of the poverty mindset and the scarcity mindset. And the Poverty Stoplight tool is the most incredible tool, founded by one of our fellow Schwab fellows, Martine Burt. I really encourage you to look that up, povertystoplight.org. And we brought it to South Africa. And what it does is it is for a family living in poverty, it asks some very, very practical questions. And everything is very visual. So it's 50 indicators, and you can see for every indicator a picture of what it looks like to be very poor, what it looks like to be poor, and what it looks like to be not poor. And it's a stoplight system, red, orange, green. And it's amazing, just in the self-diagnosis, we do it with a very well-trained facilitator. The family starts having different dialogues. The family goes, "Wow, I didn't think we had so many greens. Wow, we're actually not poor." Therein is an I can moment. And the next I can moment is, "Well, we're orange in this indicator. Look at the green. That doesn't look so hard to do. And it's broken into 50 things. So I need to do 50 things differently in my life." And immediately they start doing them without us having to do anything. It just happens because for the first time we've demystified poverty. And poverty isn't the fancy BMW or the fancy clothes I'm wearing, and it's so much more than money in the house that I'm living in. Right. And so that's the sort of, it's a long answer to a question about robust program. I think we've addressed every angle in that we have a robust business model. So we resource the product for free, we sell it to the woman. We invest all of that money in her training and development, and that program is a very deep program. And so therefore we get true change and true impact that it's extremely visible. You can see it, you can feel it, and it's sustainable because we went deep enough. Yeah.
You mentioned that you've also expanded into serving men as well. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two populations and what was the thinking about expanding?
Yeah. So the thinking was we had a problem on our hands, and that was we brought on a retailer who is the biggest retailer of toasters and kettles and irons in South Africa. And we always say yes to product, and we figure out the problem. We figure out how to solve the problem later. And the irons and toasters and kettles were piling up, so these were returned. Your iron's tripping your electricity, so you go and return it to your retailer. They don't have a screwdriver and a mechanic in the back. That just goes straight to landfill. So that was now coming to us and being consolidated, and we were running out of space. And the women weren't buying it. They both bought a toaster here and a kettle here, but they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to repair it. So we advertised a program and we called it the Appliance Bank, and only men pitched up. That's really how we started working with men. And, you know, in South Africa, it's a very patriarchal society in the culture we work in. And, you know, violence, gender-based violence is very prolific. You know, we don't ask the question, well, the Poverty Stoplight does, but I would say 80% of the women in our program have experienced some form of abuse. That's just daily life. And so as we started working with men, we knew we needed to add the technical skills, but we didn't have another program. So we thought, well, let's just try it on them. And our program is all about, you know, sharing and caring and deep work and inner work. And they responded. And we suddenly had an epiphany that we're not going to fix gender-based violence working with women. Yes, we're going to help them become financially independent, which will give them choice. But there's still going to be an abuser in their neighborhood. That guy's not going away. And the only way we're going to fix gender violence is through men. And when we started working with men, we realized the first man we recruited, my co-founder and I nearly had a fight over him because I said, no ways. He was huge. He was like huge, and he was really angry. And I said, you know, we can't start with that. I mean, we can't cope with that. And we agreed it was a no. But she's much softer than I am. And next week I see him in the building. I think, how did that happen? Anyway, his name was Oscar. And I remember a year later Oscar having gone through our program, him standing in front of a group of new men we were recruiting with big crocodile tears just rolling down his eyes, down his face, not being embarrassed about that, and just sharing how and why he was angry. And he was angry. He didn't know at the time that he was angry. He didn't know why he was angry. And he was angry because he really wanted to provide for his family. And his ego was really bruised. And his only way of, you know, I don't know, fighting the world was to kind of be angry. And the minute we allowed him to process that, the anger was gone. We allowed him the opportunity to earn an income to provide for his family. And voila, the relationship between him and his wife is fundamentally different. So we really are excited to be working with men, and we're expanding that program. And we've added components to the men program where we talk about the role of a father. You know, 68% of women are single, and less than 50% of fathers provide any financial or emotional support. So they might not be living with their family, but there's no attachment. And, you know, how important it is to be fathers, how important it is to be role models. We've now got men teaching other men that program. And it's been incredible. It's been incredible to watch. I sometimes think we're having even more impact there than we are having through the women. Because, you know, what we've realized is 68% of women are single, and it continues to get worse. And at the end of the day, I'm not a social worker, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm an accountant. But my study of it is that it's all about love. And those 68% of women that continue, and the next generation that will be single, are seeking a love of the father that they never had. And there's this hole in her soul, being abandoned by a father that is still alive. Leaves a hole in your soul. And until we can get fathers to be actively involved in their children's lives, we're going to have this continuous problem of teenage pregnancy and, you know, the problem we have with single mothers.
Yeah. So you've, over the last 30 minutes or so, described such a interesting, robust, intertwined set of activities and programs and thoughtfulness that's really gone into the success of the organization. As you've traveled the world, I mean, you're connected through Ashoka and the Schwab and World Economic Forum to all these other networks. How much do you think is replicable across geographies and countries? Have you seen other models? I mean, there's like an amazing network of social entrepreneurs around the world, but is this something that's the magic of the two Tracys that's hard to replicate, or can you see things being done in other places?
Yeah. So yeah, we've been very fortunate to be connected to these incredible networks, and what I've been surprised about is that nobody else is doing this. That's like really surprised me. I mean, this isn't rocket science. It's really a simple idea that has evolved, and like what is everybody else doing with their waste? And the charity shop model seems to be the standard model, but it's very much for consumer waste. So it's my beauty model, my clothes coming out of my cupboard. What are retailers in the US doing with the waste that ends up at the back of store? Nobody's talking about it. Burberry got caught because they're burning their product.
Yep.
France has just passed a law where they can no longer burn their product. And that is what is happening in the supply chain. There is between 2 to 3% of retail sales is designed to be waste. It's part of the retail model. And so can it be replicated? Well, we've replicated it 5 times in South Africa. So we have 5 branches around the country, and everything is protocolized. So everything is documented. Provincially, there are marginal differences. You have different cultures in different provinces, and it works everywhere. So we know we can do that. And so how do we take this to a different country? And in my opinion, you need 2 or 3 things. One, you need supply, okay? And so this is not going to work in the middle of Africa where no retailers have gone before. You need supply of you need one major retailer to say, yes, we're going to do this just like we did in South Africa. And preferably it would be the leading retailer around sustainability. And that's what happened in South Africa. Woolworths is the leading retailer around sustainability. And when Woolworths goes in a direction, the rest follow, sort of thing. And so you need one retailer to say yes. And then you need demand. So you need, the beauties of the world who are stuck in poverty and for which they have a market for this product. And so often I have many people from Africa coming up to me and saying, this model could be replicated. I said, you don't have supply. Yes, you have demand. And if we got you supply, a lot of people want to replicate it in rural areas. Well, the supply and the demand don't match, because the product you're getting is high fashion merchandise. And in South Africa, women are highly aspirational around clothing. If I brought one of our women into this program, I mean, she'd knock your socks off the way she dresses. So, it's got to be a matched supply, and there's got to be an economy. And in the other ICANN moment that's really important, that when we designed the model, I didn't quite know it at the time, we said that the woman that is going to sell the product must sell it in her own community, in her own language. Because the chances that she's going to have success in that environment and lower her anxiety levels is much higher. She's going to go knocking on doors in suburbs she doesn't know. She's going to get the door slammed in her face. The typical guy selling the vacuum cleaner in the old days. I knocked on 1,000 doors before I got a sale. She probably wouldn't have got past door number 3 or 4, and she would have had I'm not a salesman or a saleswoman. So it's really those two. And I mean, why not the US? There are definitely poor people in America, I hear.
And inequality and walls and all sorts of...
what about the refugee crisis in Europe?
Right.
Most people ask me the question, weren't the retailers terrified that you were going to be selling their merchandise in the same market they were selling in? I said, well, it's not the same market. There isn't a Woolworths store in a township in South Africa. The customer that's buying this merchandise is not the same customer that they're selling to. She wants to be that customer, and one day she will be that customer. And you know what? You created the product. You have to take responsibility for it. And it's such a small amount relative to your total market size. There's absolutely you're doing bad business if it's too much. You've made bad choices in terms of buy. But it's 2% of your annual retail sales how can that destroy your market? And so I think retailers need to be less scared to utilize their excess in their own market. We know retailers are dumping this product in Africa. We know that they're destroying industries in Africa as a result of that. And I think as consumers, we need to be saying, what is happening to this product? And today I had the fortune of meeting the head of sustainability for Levi Strauss at the SDG Summit. And we just happened to be in a discussion group, and she said, I don't know what we're doing with our product. And that was the same in South Africa. They didn't really know what they were doing. Store managers dealt with that. You know, it wasn't such a big problem at an individual store level. It's only when we brought it together, and it was one line on an income statement, you know, it's been there for years, and as long as it stays within a certain tolerance level, that's part of the model. And I think we need to be asking those questions.
All right, so I have lots more questions that I can keep asking, but I also want to give an opportunity for all of you. I think you've got enough of a rich set of context about what Tracey's organization does. Questions, please.
Hi, thank you for coming. Whenever you spoke about the woman who graduated with zero in her bank account, what did you change in the model to help address that?
So we changed how we measured impact. So we were measuring impact on how much product she bought from us, and we knew we had a proxy for what she was going to sell that for, so we could calculate her profit. We'd always done a lot of financial literacy because we knew financial discipline and a healthy relationship with money would translate hopefully into her running a healthy business. But we'd never understood poverty. And so by us having that epiphany that really we had done nothing other than perhaps teach her that she could sell. But we'd done nothing to eradicate poverty in the life. So we changed our vision statement. We changed our vision statement from helping women become financially and socially independent to helping women eradicate poverty in their families. And then we were fortunate enough to find the poverty stoplight tool, which was another divine intervention. And it helped us understand poverty. And then we met Vivian Schultz, and she helped us understand how the brain works and all of those things. So by building a new ecosystem and actually helping families self-diagnose, and I mean, Martin, the founder of Poverty Stoplight, he makes a very controversial statement. And that is that poverty is a choice. Now that doesn't feel good to say. But when you watch people make choices and understand that for every choice there's a consequence, and if I self-reflect and I adapt, I will get a different result. And people have overcome poverty. There are millions and millions and millions of examples of that, and it wasn't all luck. It was about a series of choices that they made. And when people who are trapped in poverty understand that they are the only people that can get them out of poverty, they are the only people. Nobody can do it for them. And they start making different choices, they will eradicate poverty. I can guarantee you that a woman successful in our program now will eradicate poverty in her family. And that's because we've shown her the full complexity of it. And it's not just about money.
Great question. Please.
I have a question about, I really appreciated what you were saying about going deep. But I feel like in order to do that, there has to be there's time associated with that. And running, it sounds like you run a very kind of like commercially driven social enterprise. So how are you allowing the women that you work with to have the time to do that emotional development work that is providing them the confidence to be commercially successful? And like, have you built that into your, like, the commercial side where you're saying like, hey, this is going to take time. So how do you walk that?
Well, actually, for us, it's almost the opposite, because the longer a woman stays, the better her business is going to do, and therefore the more money I'm going to make to sustain her. So because it's such a beautiful model, is that she's actually paying for her own training. Okay, so I'm recruiting her, if I do a good job recruiting the right person, and she responds to the intervention, she's going to be buying a lot of merchandise from me, which I'm going to be using to sustain the organization. So I can measure that. I can measure whether the intervention is working based on the sales that I do every month. And we like a target-driven organization. I can get a sales report now. So we're like a retailer, but we're a retailer for purpose versus a retailer, just for profit's sake. So actually letting them go is the problem, because every 2 years I'm starting with a new cohort to take time to move up the trajectory. So it's worked. That's just how the business model works. But I can tell you, we now working the Poverty Stoplight tool. We now work with 50 different. We've basically in South Africa created a forum where many organizations are working with the Poverty Stoplight tool, because for us it was like a light bulb moment, and we realized there are so many NGOs that are working on poverty but not understanding it. And so we now have 50 different nonprofits and corporates working with the Poverty Stoplight tool. And I can tell you, based on the results organizations are getting through that, is a short program will not work. 35 years of a deeply entrenched poverty psyche is not going to change in a 1-week life skills program or 1-week piece. And anybody who tells you that doesn't know what they're talking about and has never tried it and never measured impact. So you got to undo 35 years. That's not going to happen overnight. Secondly, and basically we've identified that programs need to have 3 elements if you're working on poverty eradication. And the one is, I need to earn today. Today is the choice between going to bed hungry or not. And those are real life situations. We have women walking in our door all the time who have hungry children at home. So I can't go on a 6-month course and at the end of the day you say, right, write your business plan and start a business. I'm out of that. I haven't even got to the end of week 1 of that program. So I have to earn now. And you have to give that woman who is like a baby in the business world, like if you think of the analogy of a baby, you have to give her a real income earning opportunity today, that she's going to have that icon moment. That's number 1. And so many programs don't have that if they're using business as the tool to eradicate poverty. They have programs and write a business plan, and they think people who are babies can ideate and implement. Running a business is one of the most complex things. Ask me, it's much harder than running the finance department in a retailer. So you have to have a real business earning opportunity that can earn her money today. Secondly, you have to do, and with that has to be skills development to run that business at a business level. Then you have to do personal development, and then you actually just have to do healing. And healing comes in the space. So we call it a sisterhood. Joining people together who are on the same journey. On the day 1, they share where they're at. And when you ask for feedback after that day, it's like, how did that day go? Because it's lots of tears, and a woman will leave saying, I realize my problems are not as bad as hers. I feel better already. And so it's joining that sisterhood where I can heal through a process of nurturing and love. And in order for you to work deeply at a poverty level, you need all 3. And probably a few more, but those are the key 3. And so often programs are working on components. You can partner. So maybe you have one component and another program has another component, but you need to understand that that's the components you need. And working with your model will be flawed. It's like building a puzzle. You just won't have a complete picture. Yes.
Can you tell us more about the business model? So, you said it's completely sustainable. I would think that the margins on the clothing you're selling to is not the only source.
Yeah. So
do they get seed?
Yeah.
$60
Yeah.
Is that the only part or
Yeah. So I always put it in sort of the following terms, is that So we're getting the product for free. We have to spend some money collecting that product. So we have trucks on the road, and South Africa's got very much a mall culture. So all the retailers are in the same mall. We'll go to Mall A on a Monday and sweep that mall and come back with a full truck. So as we got all the retailers on board, we got more efficient in that. And then we bring that into a warehouse, and the women in our program have to, as a contribution, which is another ICANN, have to work in our facility 1 day a week as their contribution to the organization. They don't pay anything else for their training. And then if she buys, so our investment cost in her, in training and development, because it's a very high touch program, is about $3,200 a year. And she's with us for 2 years. If she buys $3,200 of merchandise in that year, she's paid for her own training and development. And that's really how the model works. So at the moment, we are 80% self-funded. So the revenue that we generate from selling the merchandise covers 80% of our costs. And we could be 100%, but we have funding for the other 20. So we're able to do some nice bells and whistles and some fun stuff and some experimental stuff. But if that funding had to disappear, we would be totally self-funded. One of our strategies has been to buy our own buildings. So in South Africa, there is an opportunity through the Black Economic Empowerment Act. If you're working particularly with small black businesses, you can access funding. And so we've been able to access loan funding to buy our own buildings because our buildings are big. You guys talking feet, I don't know what that is, but 2,000 square meters is the average size. So they're a campus and a warehouse where we've got to house this product. And it's about 20% of our cost we're paying in rent. So we bought our own building, and within 3 years in Cape Town, we're cash positive. And we'll eliminate basically our rental cost. And so we've just bought our next building, and next year we'll buy our third building, and those are our 3 biggest branches and the most expensive real estate. So yeah, she pays for her own training, and essentially the retailer is our biggest donor. But they don't consider it as a donation. We're providing a service. We're their recycler, and we're not charging them to recycle. We're doing it for free. And they get to tell a great story. So in Woolworths, behind the cash desk, there'll be a sign as big as this board at the moment that says, all of our waste is donated to the clothing bank, which is empowering unemployed mothers. And they're getting all that PR and the value for that for free. And we're just the intermediary, and every retailer, the crux is that right from day one, luckily the Woolworths, they're almost like a little bit, they're not really brash around marketing. They'll market their product, but they don't like say, hey, look at us, we're the best in the world. They're very cautious around that. So from day one, they didn't want to own the clothing bank. I offered it to them, and that was a mistake. It would have been a mistake if they owned it, because we wouldn't have got another retailer on board. It's Woolworths' project. And because they didn't own it, everybody could join the party, and every single retailer can have that sign behind their desk, behind their cash desk. And they do. They use it on social media, they use it on their websites, and everybody's getting the benefit of the story of what's happening to their waste. So I don't know if that answers your question around the business model. Yeah. Yes, I'll come to you at the back now.
Continue with that business model. So once the women get the clothes, what's the business model for them in terms of selling?
Yeah. So it's a simple business model. They're trading. So they live in, most women live in communities which we would call townships, which are, I think in your terms, like slums, essentially. It was basically post-1994, black South Africans during apartheid were settled by the government deliberately in what they call homelands, which was far from any economic activity, so that the government could control them, and basically isolation in a sense. So the minute apartheid collapsed, people flooded to the economic centers. And so on the periphery of every city is basically townships. And that's where these women live, which are vibrant communities, and there's massive informal trade in that community. So literally, I can tell you that now she's using social media and WhatsApp. So she's got a WhatsApp group of her customers. She's in our warehouse. She's taking pictures. And before she's at the till paying for her goods, those goods are sold. And she's probably got runners in the community, and this one's running in that direction, or she's selling it on the train, or she's selling it on the taxi on the way home. Or she's got a sister who is employed, who's working in a massive call center in a dead-end job where there are 3,000 people, and she said to her sister, can't you speak to her boss? I'll pitch up on the 25th of the month when everybody gets paid, and I quickly, show my wares. And she has to trade for one day, and she's made more than she could have ever made in any monthly salary. So it's informal trading, buying and selling. I said I'd go there. I'm coming there now. I'm going to promise you I'm going to look this way in a second.
Hi, Tracey. I had a question for you. I don't know if you work in any rural areas, and I was wondering if you do, whether you do anything more extensive for the community, because obviously the cycle of poverty in those areas goes beyond, the home and so forth, and the infrastructure, food supply, and so forth.
Yeah.
So about that.
We don't. And the simple reason we don't is because the product that we can source, there will be no demand. This is high fashion mission. This is high heel shoes and, leather boots and handbags, etc. So we tried it. We tried to go into a peri-urban area, and there wasn't the demand, and there wasn't the economy, for the product. So, we've reconciled ourselves to the fact that this is a metropolitan model, but there are millions and millions of women and men living in these metropolitan city slums. So we know what we're sticking to our knitting.
And do you go beyond the women and do something more expensive with the community, or is it really only focused on?
No, so she's doing the work in her community. Okay, so what has been very, very powerful, I'll always give you the analogy because it kind of works for me. So when you are overweight, you will generally surround yourself with people who are also overweight, because you can talk about how you can't lose weight, and this diet, and every time you've tried 10 diets, and every time you say to your friends or your family, I'm going to go on a diet, they go, oh God, you tried everything, you're destined to be fat, and have another glass of wine and have a piece of cake or whatever. And what you need to do, really, if you really want to embark on a weight loss journey, is you need to possibly don't tell anyone, okay? And go and join a group that is a Weight Watchers or whatever that are on a weight loss journey, and bond with them. And when you're 20 kilos down, your friends are going to go, wow, you're looking fantastic. How'd you do it? I also want to join. And that's essentially what happens to our women. A lot of them embark on our journey, and they almost keep it a secret because they're scared of failure. And then they start living the difference, and they become incredible role models in their community, and it's almost contagious. And we don't ever have to look for women. It's like a constant stream. We're oversubscribed 5 times. And if I ask everyone who's applying today, how did you hear about the clothing bank? They'll tell you, I saw another woman who was successful. So they're doing the work in their communities. And that's how it should be, because they're working on poverty eradication. Me and my family, and once I finish me and my family, that's how it works. Nobody needs to do it for them.
Thank you so much. This is just incredible, especially about the healing and deep aspect of it. I have a more technical question about the government's involvement. So first of all, the 2 or 3% given by the clothing companies, is that viewed as a donation? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah.
This tax law, is that like a tax deduction? And then secondly, how is the government responding to this? This food, or sorry, the clothing bank acting as a platform to encourage informal sector? Obviously we're
Good question. So yes, it is a tax break, but actually it doesn't really need to be a tax break because it's a normal write-off in their systems. So it kind of waste is in production of income. So they don't need a special certificate from me, but we could give them one if they needed one, and it would be completely acceptable. But in South Africa, we have an added benefit, and that benefit is an act called the Black Economic Empowerment Act. And what it stands to do is basically level the playing fields and really give what is defined in South Africa as previously disadvantaged South Africans kind of a head start, because white South Africans have had a head start for generations. And so it's a very clever act. I mean, there are many people who say it doesn't work, but I think it really does if people don't do fronting, okay? And what it seeks to do, it seeks to address a whole lot of different elements of economic empowerment. It looks at company ownership. It looks at who's managing the company and the racial profile of that in decision-making levels. It looks at certain things that you have to do around employees at a lower level. It looks at where you're spending your training money. It looks at where you're buying from. So where's your product buying from? And a certain percentage has to come from black businesses. And then it says, okay, you say you can't find black businesses. Well, then you have to spend a certain amount on small black businesses. Then you have to integrate those small black businesses into your supply chain because people were just spending it over there. And then you have to do a certain percentage of the profits into non-profit work that is about economic empowerment. So we created our business model, and we are able to address ownership. We can actually take shares in companies if we wanted to. We can do skills development. We can do economic it's called enterprise development, which is small black business. Our women are all 100% black-owned businesses, and we're a non-profit. So we basically can cherry-pick funding from this pool of funding for black economic empowerment, and every retailer gets points for enterprise development from their product donation. But that's always a worry because that law will change at some point. We're 24 years into democracy, and everybody's saying, well, we've got what they call born frees. So a born free, should a born free, when does it stop? And so we've surveyed our retailers and said to them, if we didn't have the Black Economic Empowerment Act, would you guys still do what you do? And they said, yeah, it just makes complete sense. I mean, what would we do if we didn't give you the product? So I think it was a catalyst, and it was certainly a sell tool, but it's not why they do it anymore.
And the second question about, does the government, are they upset that you're kind of fueling an informal economy that the women are running? So I feel like I'm thinking of a U.S. perspective. Kiosks and people selling things, and it's like that's illegal in some senses. So I'm just curious. Like registered businesses, and they're selling. It's a good question.
They would love everyone to run a registered business, and I actually am in a legal dispute with our Department of Trade and Industry, who gave us money to do exactly this work, and we never promised that everybody would have a registered company, but they literally want to come in and get everyone to open a PTY so they can tick a box. And I said, you got to be kidding me, if because that's the only way they can measure business creation. I said, really? It's not in any law that you have to have a PTY to be self-employed, and you need to find a better way to measure that. So that's the utopia, but they understand that there's such a skills deficit that the informal market is going to be around forever, and they better learn to embrace it. Otherwise, they're going to have our problems are just our problems are just going to get worse. So there's a bit of a parallel system. What is tolerated in a developed suburb or a privileged suburb. If I try to sell wares on the side of my street, I wouldn't last very long, or my neighbors would complain and everything. In an informal sector, anything goes really, and it's no problem. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I have a question about your discussion about meeting people where they're at and meeting people where we're at. Sometimes we hear the entrepreneurs who do work with the inner cities, and they have to understand how to do business, and I imagine this is part of your training and development, but have you ever ran into ethics and integrity issues and needing to train them on that particular topic? How do you face that, if there are examples? And you mentioned the program that you've created has contributed back for women to bring contributions to their household and education. Have you done anything within the healthcare sector with the women as well?
Okay, good questions. I'm tired, so you might have to reframe the second question for me. So the first question was, remind me again. Integrity. Okay. Right. Good question. This woman, Vivian Schultz, has a quote that in order, because we have a major problem around integrity. Okay, so theft is our biggest issue, and she will say to you that you can't train integrity. You can't train ethics. You have to, and she has a statement that says, you have to be conscious to grow a conscience. And so many of our women are unconscious. They operate in the world in an unconscious state when they come to us. And that's what the poverty mindset does. There's a fantastic book called Scarcity, and it's really sort of scientifically based at actually what happens in a moment of scarcity. And your executive function lowers, your IQ lowers, your planning lowers, everything lowers. And every time I've caught a woman stealing, it's like it breaks your heart. It's the hardest part about doing this work. It breaks your heart because you have to have a zero tolerance approach, otherwise you've got anarchy. And I know that I'm going to let that woman go and they're going to be hungry children. Well, hopefully she's taken some of the lessons, and able to apply that. And when I say to her, what were you thinking? And so often it's the small thing. It's just temptation. And her answer will be, I wasn't thinking. And I've realized that in that moment, she wasn't thinking. And we have to do more to make sure we don't create a scarcity mindset. So we have only so much product. And of course, every item is gold. And when you see a brand new pair of leather boots come through the warehouse and there's only one of them, that's a moment of scarcity. And so you're probably going to shut down in that moment and make some bad choices. And we need to do as much as we can to create an abundance mindset and not create moments of scarcity. I think it's really hard to, and I know you do prison reintegration, but I do think it's really, really hard to, if you've had a life of stealing, okay, because you've been poor and you needed to steal and all the rest, you've almost become desensitized to it. So I do believe that we do know the difference between right and wrong because we get a physical reaction when we do something wrong. If I tell a lie today, I'm probably going to get sweaty palms and feel a little bit nervous. And same when I when I steal for the first time, or I murder for the first time, or whoa. And the more you do that, the more the physical reaction becomes desensitized. So in that moment of her stealing, she's not. There's nothing to stop her doing it because there's nothing. She's not awake. She's not in her body, and so that's where the work comes to create the conscience and the abundance mindset and then we talk about it. But we can't talk about it until she's awake and alive again. And the second question was?
Have you been involved in anything with their healthcare?
Yes, absolutely. So part of the Poverty Stoplight is about health. And we see lots of mental health issues, depression. We see a lot of lifestyle-related illnesses, diabetes. HIV is very prevalent. About 30% of our women have HIV. Many of them are obese because of poor diet. And we measure all of that, and we talk about it, and we bring in healthcare professionals. And one woman had epilepsy, and literally, the amount of times we rushed her to hospital, and then we realized it was all about the fact that she didn't know how to take her medication. So sometimes it's simple things. Another woman was graduating recently, and I don't know everybody anymore because there's just too many women, but I looked at her and I said, I actually don't recognize you at all. You've been here for 2 years, but I don't recognize you. And she said, well, shall I show you a picture of what I used to look like? And she was 30 kilos lighter, and that's because she actually wanted to live. She really wanted to live for the future. So yes, absolutely. Healthcare, we talk about a healthy family, a healthy relationship, a healthy body results in a healthy business.
Is this through the, what is it, community that you both talk about?
The
Situations. You mentioned that you create a community.
a sisterhood.
Yes,
Sisterhood.
Sort of the sisterhood
Yeah.
that they get to
Yeah,
serve with.
but also in our program, deliberately, nutrition is part of there. Sex education is part of it. We talk about STDs. We talk about it all. It's got to be talked about. And
Figure out when to introduce these topics.
I think over the first sort of 2 to 3 years, we saw a cycle. So we saw a cycle. What happened in the first 3 months, then what happened, and crafted it and sort of inserted it when we knew. So one of the things we were experiencing as she was doing really well, she fell pregnant. Like, huh? Like, okay. And we realized that, when you're feeling good, you have more sex. And you don't worry about the consequences so much because you got money to pay for the baby. And, then we had to talk about, planned pregnancies and, So, we sort of we sort of figured it out as we went along and try to find the moment when she was going to be receptive to that piece of information and spread it out over a longer period. There's only so much you can receive at any one point when you've got to be ready for it. So yeah, it's been playing around with it in a sense.
It's interesting you started with the clothing and then it dived out to all these other social issues that you're helping solve. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe one or two more and then wrap up.
How long do women are usually in the program? Because I understand they stay for various periods of time.
So they're with us for 2 years in the training program, and they're trading at the same time. From the first 2 weeks of joining us, they're trading. And then, we were going to let everyone go and everybody was going to keep trading. And that happens, but we do allow them to come back and buy product once a month. And we have enough product to do that. And it's just like a little bit of a safety net. Many don't need to do that because they've sourced their own product, and there is other excess in the market, typical outlet type store product. She diversifies into a totally different product. I have a woman flying to China now. That kind of thing. Once she's figured out that it's a simple business, buying and selling. And when she's figured out what people want and she can source it at the right price, why not go to China? So, but it's a safety net for those that, and that once a month buying, she can basically maintain her lifestyle that she had certainly while she was at the clothing bank. And it just, it's there for her if she needs it for now. If it's never a guarantee. So we always say to her, it's never a guarantee. And most women use it for the first sort of transition period, maybe for 6 months. And then she realizes, I don't need this. I thought I needed it, but I actually don't need it. And then we do keep 10% of our women. This is something we started about 2 years ago. We realized we were losing these amazing women who were great role models. The woman who had lost the 30 kilos, and we keep 10% of our women who are what we call live the sister values. So they've embraced they're not just great businesswomen, but they really are living examples and what people would want to aspire to. And we keep them as ambassadors. And they are now facilitating our classes and being business mentors and peer mentors. And they are legitimate. Me telling a woman from a slum, you need to buy this and sell this and do this, and I was going, yeah, sure, you know what you're talking about. And when it's like the thin person telling you need to go on a diet, it's so simple. And so these ambassadors are having the most incredible traction really quickly. And also because she's experienced it, I can maybe disclose to her at a time when I'm feeling low. And certainly encourage right from the beginning to bond with this woman. We're all going to feel low at some point. We're all going to feel, we don't want to get out of bed today, we want to give up, and she can then have a relationship with that woman, and that's really working really well for us. So they stay for another 2 years.
Are they paid or are they volunteer?
They volunteer, but they can still make their money they can still buy product. So they continue buying the product from us.
So my question is builds a little bit on this. As I understand it, you're taking these women when they're business owners, a baby, and you're teaching them a lot of entrepreneurial skills and just business management skills. Is there a desire to enter into the formal economy from there? Or is there members of the formal economy that are specifically looking to them, even to the clothing bank?
Yeah, certainly I think like everything, the reality is that 99% of these women are not natural entrepreneurs. They were necessity entrepreneurs. And we're just helping them sort of move from necessity to sustainability through ICANN. Many have gone on to create multiple businesses, but they're not gonna. They haven't got. It's a whole another level to be running a corporation, employing people. Most of them will stay in the trading. So I'll give you an example of the typical other businesses she would create. She would diversify her product suite. She would create, a lot of them are creating like real estate type businesses, catering type businesses, service type businesses, funerals, those kind of things, where it's a similar sort of thing. There's maybe an element of small, catering. You've got to know how to make goods, and we do teach that. So we don't just teach a simple business model, we do teach the other complexity. I'll tell you a quick story about a woman. Her name is Sibongile Shabalala. And she was also a very large woman, very tall, like a man. And she was in our first intake in our Durban branch. And she wasn't particularly literate, which is a requirement because we do teach in English. But she was very funny. And she had her story was so complicated. She was the mistress of a man who lived up the road, and she had twin children by him, but the wife didn't know, which is the normal story. And Mrs. Sibongile was, if you ask her, have you run a business before? Her answer was yes. And, what business was she in? And the answer was, she sells soup bones on credit. Well, okay, that's interesting. Soup bones on credit. I mean, that's like R2 a packet, or 20 cents a packet. Anyway, I sort of said, no, I don't think we should take Sibongile, but we did because she had a great sense of humor, and sometimes you got to have an outlier. And she's now called Mrs. Bones. So Mrs. Bones joined our program, and we discovered that she had 30,000 Rand in retail debt. How she got that is another problem that we have. There's complete exploitation of debt, and it's a bubble waiting to burst. Anyway, we really do encourage financial responsibility and taking ownership for your debt, because it has a long-term impact. So within the first year, Mrs. Bones had repaid her $3,000 debt. She'd bought a minibus. It wasn't a minibus, a vehicle that could transport children to school, and she was running that as a business before she came to the clothing bank. So she'd hustle the kids to school, and she was getting probably $50 a month per child, and she was probably hustling 15 kids to school. And then she'd come to the clothing bank, and then she'd run home and fetch the kids from school and hustle them. So that was business number one. And at the end of the second year, she'd put down a 50% deposit on a 5-bedroomed house. And it wasn't for herself. That was to rent out each room as a business, as a hostel. And so that's but she'd figured out how to make money. And if you talk to her, you say, Mrs. Bones, what was your strategy? And she said, well, I didn't indulge myself. I didn't buy a car for myself. I saw everything as a business opportunity. So it's really creating that opportunity mindset and to chase those opportunities. And who knows where she'll end,
Do you find it all that the formal economy, though, is actually trying to bring these women in to be employees because of their entrepreneurial spirit and their skill sets that they've acquired?
we've tried to employ quite a number of our women, and our retail partners have tried to employ a number of our women. But they just giggle and laugh and they say, "Are you crazy? Are you crazy? I know how to make real money now. And you're never going to pay me what I can actually make." And actually, I love the flexibility and I love being my own boss. And no, thank you. We're going to do one more? Yeah.
Last question. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I would love to hear your thoughts on the decision that a social entrepreneur has to go through between like creating a nonprofit organization and a for-profit like social venture, and sort of how you, like what was your decision?
Yeah. In South Africa, we have a non-profit or a for-profit. We don't have a, I don't know if you have that in the States.
Hybrid,
we don't have a
B
hybrid.
Corps,
yeah.
Lots of legal models.
Yeah, so that was your choice. And we had that debate in my study in 2009. And at the end of the day, it came down to which vehicle could we use to raise the most product and the most money. Yeah. And I was never going to get retailers to give me, you know, the gazillions amounts of product that they give me if I own the entity. And so we went with the not-for-profit model, but that doesn't mean you can't make a profit. I think that's the misnomer. You can make a profit, and I intend to do that one day, and just to continue reinvesting that in our business. Yeah, I think, you know, one of my messages around creating a social enterprise, you know, I lecture at UCT in their strategy class, and I get a lot of students wanting to create social enterprises, and my first thing is, why do you want to create a new entity? I think there's this new, you know, everybody needs to have a new charity and I know it's probably anti-business school, but the reality is that there's so much proliferation, you know, and if you're a social entrepreneur, you're really passionate about the problem. Because if you're not really passionate about the problem, you're not going to continue on this journey. This is hard. I always say if your why doesn't make you cry, you won't last in this industry. And if you're really, really passionate about your problem, there's probably somebody else also trying to solve that problem. And first look for that and join them. Add your skills and resources to that pot so that we can reach scale and really solve problems, because everybody's fighting for the same pot of money. Everybody's fighting for the same pot of money. I mean, the Schwabbies is hilarious. When you go to work, they come on before me like bees to the honey pot. Who's here? Who's here? You know, that kind of thing. And everybody was telling me this week, oh my God, I've got 1 month left in the bank account and I've got 3 weeks left in the mail. And oh my goodness, it's depressing. So, you know, unless you've got a real business model and a true, and I see so few true social enterprises. A lot of people saying they're social enterprises, and I'm an accountant, so I always ask, explain your business model to me. And I go, no, we're fully funded. I go, oh, okay, how are you a social enterprise? And I know there's lots of debate around that. But that what I would say to you first is go and see if there's somebody out there trying to solve your problem, and the same problem you want to solve, and whether you can join the party and with your wonderful training and passion, go and make their model better. And then if you can't find it, and I didn't know that at the time, I went and created my own entity, because it's a lot about ego. And if you can't find it and you really think you've got a unique model, then you can go and create your own entity. But the world doesn't need more nonprofits, I can tell you that. South Africa's got like something like 300,000 nonprofits.
I hate to end on that.
Sorry, I'm sure that's not what I was supposed to say.
But I mean, I do agree that, you know, doing your sense of what's out there in the landscape, and if you can help scale something that already exists, that's awesome, because you don't have to always start from scratch. So it's really so much advice and insight from your story, Tracey. Thank you so much. So appreciative of you coming.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel very